Hello, everybody. Welcome back. How you doing? Hopefully, everybody's doing better now. You've got everything straightened out with the power and water and everything. If you have problems, let me know. Email me, and I'll try to work with you on that. But for today, what I wanted to cover was the assignments due this week, and I'll go over them right now and next week. So let's get it started with screen sharing. The first assignment is that I wanted to go over was, excuse me. Okay, here we go. First assignment that is due is this one, the Federalist 10 and 51 political philosophy paper. What I'd like you to do is read the two Federalist papers at the back of your book. Now, what I mean by the back of your book is go to the back of your book, and what you'll see is after all the chapters, the appendixes or appendices, they're A through F. And the first one is the Declaration of Independence. The second one, the Constitution of the United States. And then the third one is Federalist Papers number 10 and number 51. So what I want you to do is go all the way back to that. So it's after chapter 16, and it's the third appendices or appendix. So you can read the chapter introduction, and it talks about what they did. The founders completed drafting the Constitution in 1787. It was then submitted to the states, because there were states before this new national government, for ratification, and a major debate ensued, as you read about in chapter 2. Now, on one side, there were the Federalists, and they wanted the Constitution adopted immediately as it was, but then there were the Anti-Federalists who argued because of a lack of protection of civil liberties that we read of in chapter 4 that were of concern to them in many states. And these were important people in these state legislatures and important members of the communities. Now, during the course of these debates, three Federalists, Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, would write a series of papers that would appear in newspapers, which was really the only way to communicate in a mass media format. They wrote these essays and argued for immediate ratification of the Constitution. Now, they appeared in newspapers like the New York City Independent Journal in October, less than a month after they adjourned in Philadelphia. And later, the Hamilton arranged to have the essays collected and published in a book form. And they're often referred to collectively as the Federalist Papers. And this is a book that had a significant impact on the decisions of states to ratify the Constitution. And many of these essays are a series of political essays, and they're articles written to sway the audience that this Constitution will protect them against tyranny and will be the most efficient, most effective form of government. And they also shed the important light on what the intentions were of the founders, what they believed. And we present in this appendix just two of them, Federalist Paper number 10 and Federalist There were a total of 85 of them, and most of them were written by Hamilton. Madison's number 10 and number 51 are two of the most important ones. Now, they referred to themselves so they wouldn't be known. They wanted to be anonymous. They just referred to themselves as Publius, the public, the people. And these documents are in your book. So here's number 10. Now, the information in the first paragraph is just a little bit of an introduction into what it's going to tell you. This essay is, again, to counter the arguments put forth by the anti-federalists. And in this one, they talk about factions. And now we're going to learn about it in the interest group chapter, where you have factions. Factions form in society because you have different interests, different passions, as it's talked about in this Federalist paper. He goes into discussing that, what a faction is. He talks about a minority of the population, the total population, or a part of the population. And he talks about their common interest or passion. Hence, we get interest groups. But sometimes they're adverse to the rights of other citizens and the permanent interests of the entire community. And so he looks then next at how do you fix the problems with factions, because they can cause problems. Well, you can remove liberty. Well, that's not very good. You destroy freedom. Or you can give everybody the same opinion. Well, that ain't going to work. None of us have the same opinions exactly. We may have similar opinions. So the only thing you can do is control for that, and he goes into that. Now, he also discusses why people have differences of opinion. A lot of it has to do with different kinds of amounts of property they own. But it's basically in the nature of people, man, to be different, to have different passions. So the cause of faction is just in us as humans. And then he goes into, again, a discussion of the differences of resources, and that increases the spirit of passion and party and faction and so on. And then he goes, well, how should we settle disputes? And, well, one way we can do this is to just somehow control the passions, control the factions. And he believes that this new government will do that because it will ensure that liberties are protected, and that if you had a pure democracy, which would mean that the majority would always rule, you could destroy the minority rights. But that's not what we have here, because we have states, we have different branches of government. So he sets forth why this Republican form of government is going to be a cure for the mischiefs of factions, problems associated with factions. And so he goes on to discuss this. And in the last passages, Madison looks at another point of difference between a republic and a democracy. And he talks about how a republic can cover a large amount of territory and a greater number of citizens than a democracy can. And so that can pull together people with lots of talents and interests, and they can act in the interests of society at the local level, and they can dominate their local governments, but they can't dominate the national governments. So this is one of the arguments he makes for this new republic in Federalist number 10. Now, if we go to the next one, Federalist 51, another classic in American political theory. And this one talks about the checks and balances that would help prevent tyrannies. And he talks about the separation, each branch of the government separated. So he talks about all of these things, and you can watch the videos, which will give you a little background, and ask yourself these questions. What did political theorists believe about democracy prior to James Madison? Well, he gets into that in the discussions in these two papers. So keep notes on that. And why did they think this? Well, he talks about it in these Federalist papers. You know, in a democracy, um, you've got, like I said, majority rule, and oftentimes they will tyrannize over the minority because there's no control. They can take your property, they can take your children, and so on. Here we go. He talks about it right here. From this view of the subject, it may be concluded that a pure democracy, by which I mean a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble and administer the government in person, can admit of no cure for the mischiefs of faction. A common passion or interest will in almost every case be felt by a majority of the whole. A communication in concert results from the form of government itself, and therefore is nothing to check the inducements to sacrifice the weaker party or an obnoxious individual. And that was one of the problems in the Athenian democracies and the other democracies in Greece. They would oftentimes be swayed by the passions of a speaker and issue orders to execute all the inhabitants of a colony because they had offended the sensibility of a few powerful, influential persons, men in the assembly. That's not a good thing. It could end, like I say, in violence. And that's why they come to the conclusion, as Madison does, that democracies are inefficient, ineffective, and can become tyrannical. At first, they seem okay, but in the end, they end up destroying society. Well, anyway, so read that, a little bit of more information about the structure. Make sure, of course, it's formatted correctly in MLA, and be sure to include paragraphs and indent the first line in the paragraphs. And also make sure that it's 1-inch margins, and make sure when you justify your margins that you don't hit center, that you left justify your margins. Make sure, of course, it's double spaced. You guys all do that good. And it's Times Roman. And this paper is worth 6 points. Okay. And it should be 2.5 pages. I think that was about it. Now, the other thing that I wanted to go over was the video paper 4 that'll be due by March 6th. March 6th is, let's see, I think it's Sunday. No, it's Saturday. So that one's due by Saturday. So make sure that you watch the paper. I'm sorry, watch the video right here, and make sure that you follow the instructions. And of course, make sure that the paper is 2 pages to receive full credit, and follow these directions carefully. Try not to get behind on that. Now, the other assignment that's coming up, and let's take a look at the calendar and go over that, is the government signature assignment, which is due next Friday. Let's take a look at that one. This one has to do with remember the COVID pandemic outline I had you write? This is the actual paper that you'll finish. So be specifically, a lot of you already have done this, but make sure you answer these questions in this specific format and submit the final paper. And this one, let's see, I think it's worth 20 points. Yeah, 20 points. So upload that. And that one's due next Friday. Let's see if there's anything else. There's also a paper you'll be reading chapters 7 on political parties and 8 on public opinion, political socialization. So there'll be a video associated with that, a video paper assignment. And then there's also a video paper on the Ohio Electoral College, because you're going to look at elections in voting in chapters 8 and 9. And I want to have you look at some information on how we elect presidents and what is the Electoral College. So you'll watch one of them meeting and discussing certain things, and one in New York meeting in 2016. Here's the one in 2004.
Texas homeowners, all the electric companies in your area are raising their rates this year.
No kidding.
But you can stop
Thank
them
you.
by getting solar panels installed.
Anybody got solar?
The last few minutes of this recorded program and take you live to Columbus, Ohio for the meeting of the 51st Ohio Electoral College. Today, the Electoral College meeting across the country in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Live coverage from Columbus on C-SPAN.
Okay, so this is a meeting of the Ohio Electoral College. Each state does this every year in December. Well, I'm sorry, not each year, but each election year for the presidency. This one was in 2004 when the contestants were Bush and John Kerry, who's now working for Biden. This meeting is in the Senate chamber of the State House in the Capitol, which is in Columbus, Ohio. And you'll watch that and then proceed to the prompt questions. What did you learn about the process? Is this a good system? Would you make any changes to the presidential election system? So you can also watch these two videos. These might assist you as well on should we reform the Electoral College? And here's a joint session certifying Donald Trump as U.S. President in 2016. It's part of the process. So make sure that that's 2 pages and double space Times Roman. And of course, submit that by next Saturday, which is the 13th. Well, that's the next 2 weeks. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things are due before the spring break. Now, when we get back from the spring break, we'll begin with chapters 10 and 11 on the Congress, and the midterm examination will be Saturday the 27th. And this will be based on chapters 1 through 10, and there'll be 70 questions. Now I've given you these 92 ideas that I want you to study, or 71 ideas. Oh, well, actually there are some additional questions on some of the maps in the PowerPoint. Make sure you do look at the PowerPoint for chapter number 9. So if you go to chapter number 9 PowerPoint, there will be several questions, as I explain lecture. Here's chapter 9, PowerPoint. Well, that's the overview. Where's the PowerPoint? There should be a PowerPoint. 7, 8. What the heck? Huh. Well, I'm gonna have to include it in here. There we go. Okay. There. Well, when you read about chapter 9, you're reading about elections. We can download this. Might be quicker. It's quicker to download it. I look at it on the computer. Okay. Anyway. There. Jeez. Okay. So this one goes into the electoral college functions and how candidates are nominated, and I discuss this in the lectures. And I describe how the internet has transformed political campaigns and the current laws that regulate campaign finance. But the first thing we go into is how do we do elections and how does the electoral college function? So I throw out a lot of maps and to give you some visual assistance in understanding the topic. And then we go through step by step. How do we elect presidential candidates? And how the process begins, I go over that. What is the electoral college right here? And then the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. And discuss the votes and how that plays a factor in awarding what we call electors. So whoever wins the most votes, popular votes in a state, gets all the electoral votes. And I explain it in more detail in the lectures. But the point of the matter is I wanted to go over the maps because these will be in your test. So make sure you study these maps. Okay. These are maps from old elections where they had slightly different things happen, and we had to add amendments. We had one time where 4 guys split the popular and electoral vote, so it had to be decided by an election in the House of Representatives. And I go into detail in the lectures about that. And times when the candidate with the most popular votes does not win, like with Hillary. She didn't win the electoral vote, but she did win the popular vote. And that happened with Gore versus Bush, and Harrison versus Cleveland, and Tilden versus Hayes. So I go into those maps in detail, and those will all be on. The reason I bring this up is because these will be on the test. Yeah, I talk about it in this lecture on chapter 9, part 1. So make sure you pay attention to that. Because those kinds of things will be on the midterm. Down here under right here, starting in this area, there's going to be some slides that I want you to focus on, and I provide those maps in the midterm questions. So if we were going to look at the midterm, let me show you what they look like. You can preview those questions right now. Yeah, see these kinds of maps. These will be on the test. Which of the following states gave their votes to Burr? How many electoral votes did Benjamin Harrison receive from Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Virginia? So I give you the map, and then I ask you the question, and then here's the answers. So there are some questions from the PowerPoint in chapter 7 on political parties. So make sure you study that one. Another question is going to be on the third political party system on this chart. So study that one. Oh, and this one is from the 2015, or yeah, 15-16 edition, where I ask about voting groups in 2012 presidential elections. But it's an easy question. It's easy to answer that. And here's a question on the 2016 election, which is in chapter 9 PowerPoint, the second political party system. This is from chapter 7's PowerPoints. So study that one. Okay, so that'll get you comfortable with the midterm. Let's see, what else can I go over? So, I went over the paper. Make sure you do the 2 video papers. Those are pretty standard. You know what those are. You watch a video and you tell me what you learned and was it interesting. And then the government signature assignment. Now that's worth 20 points. So make sure you do that. And that's on the thing you've already written about, but you're going to write it in paragraph form. And then the Ohio Electoral College and New York Electoral College paper. And that's kind of interesting. And then we have a week off for spring break. That's what all this is. And then we come back and we just start discussing chapter 11 and have the midterm. But that midterm is over chapters 1 through 10. 1 through 10. And there's those questions, as I mentioned, on chapters 7 and 9 that you're going to need to do PowerPoints. And maybe the lectures might help you because I explain it in more detail. Okay, so that's for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. And I'll mention these things early next week as well. If there's any questions, I am in the chat room from 10 to noon. So if you need me, go on the chat and I'll be there. Or like you're doing right now, you've been emailing me, and I appreciate the emails. And I'll answer as soon as I can. I think that's about it. So if you need anything, let me know, and I'll be seeing you, talk with you later. Take care.